In a ruined world within the demon capital, lifeless bodies lay scattered across the ground. Seated upon his throne, a figure declared that a century had passed since he last confronted the heroes. This was Belmont, the Demon King, who had ruled for 1,000 years. 100 years ago, a hero wielding the fire element was incinerated by freezing flames. 90 years ago, a water element hero met their end in a sea of boiling water. 70 years ago, the wind element hero was swept away by a dense hurricane, and 50 years ago, a hero of the earth element was buried in dry soil. Following that, no new heroes emerged until now. A stunning woman stood before the Demon King, announcing that they had finally crossed paths. One of the king's servants begged for aid, but Belmont questioned if, even after all this time, they had learned nothing. He possessed all magical elements, leaving no hero capable of defeating him. The woman responded, remarking that men often brag before battles, but their true strength is only revealed in combat. She leaped forward to attack, initiating a legendary battle. Their fight raged on for 7 days and 7 nights. In the end, the woman surprised Belmont by kissing him, leaving him bewildered. Suddenly, he realized his body was being restrained by an unknown force, his energy rapidly vanishing. Confused, Belmont demanded to know what magic this was. The woman explained it was the cultivation of yin and yang. Thus, Belmont, the mighty demon king who had ruled for a millennium, was defeated by the heroine, whose name was Arya. 50 years later, a woman addressed a group of students, announcing the arrival of the day's main event. She guided them through a museum in the demon capital. One of the students eagerly asked if they would finally see the heroine and the demon king. Imperial Knight OM confirmed this, warning the students not to touch anything. As they entered, the students marveled at the statue of Belmont. OM explained that it was the form Belmont took after being sealed, marking the beginning of an era of peace for Pristella, all thanks to the great heroine Arya. The students admired Arya, aspiring to be like her. OM urged them to move to the next exhibit, while a young girl cleaning the floor caught her attention. The woman grabbed the girl's arm, remarking that due to Arya's generosity, demons were now allowed to coexist with humans. She pointed to the girl's horns, noting them as a defining characteristic of demons. The girl, frightened, asked why the knight was acting this way, but OM pushed her to the ground, emphasizing that demons were harmless since their innate magic had been sealed alongside Belmont. The girl remained silent but vowed to endure until the day ended. As night fell, she stood before the Demon King statue, holding a vial of magical dragon saliva, a serum capable of amplifying magical powers. She muttered to herself with excitement, knowing this was her only chance. Without hesitation, she drank it. The girl's body began to surge with power as she chanted a spell, her energy growing stronger and illuminating the room. Exhausted, she collapsed to her knees and questioned whether she had succeeded. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the statue. Tears filled her eyes as she exclaimed that the moment she had long awaited had finally arrived. The statue shattered, and Belmont emerged, awakening after decades of slumber. The woman, astonished by his youthful appearance yet mesmerized by his powerful aura, introduced herself as Lehigh. Belmont, confused, observed her closely and recalled his last memory of his servant. Doubting her identity, he asked why she was pretending to be Lehigh, as she appeared much different from what he remembered. Lehigh explained that after the war, the demon race lost their ability to use innate magic, which altered their appearances. She had been living in disguise, surviving through menial labor while secretly gathering the means to revive her lord. Embarrassed, she admitted to missing her former self. Belmont understood, recognizing the toll magic had taken on her. Memories of Arya's mysterious magic, which had sealed him, resurfaced in his mind as he descended the stairs. Lehigh desperately calls out to Belmont, urging him not to worry despite his lack of restored powers. The Demon King has returned to lead them, but Belmont refuses, leaving Lehigh stunned. He explains that he has other things he'd like to do. Lehigh asks what could possibly be more important than resurrecting the demon race, but Belmont, as he gets dressed, responds that after being the Demon King for 1,000 years, he's simply tired of it. He then asks if it isn't good to see everyone living in peace. Shocked, Lehigh yells, questioning how such a thing could even be possible. She sighs to herself, reflecting on how, in the past, everyone was so intimidated by Belmont's immense strength that they overlooked the fact that, by demon standards, he is still just a teenager. Lehigh then asks Belmont if he can at least share any information about the magic Arya had used, perhaps even its name might lead them to a solution. Belmont pauses to think and eventually says the magic that Arya had used back then was Lehigh grows excited, urging him to continue. Belmont finally explains that it is an unfamiliar magic, performed through the exchange of bodily fluids, specifically mouth-to-mouth, and is called the cultivation of yin and yang. Lehigh, incredulous, asks how such a thing could work and what Belmont felt when struck by the magic. Belmont explains that it felt as though all the blood in his body concentrated in a particular area, the lower part of his body. He describes the sensation as difficult to put into words. Lehigh, exasperated, sighs, realizing that, in some sense, this truly is an unknown magic to her. Suddenly, OM appears, interrupting them. She remarks that she suspected something unusual earlier in the day but never expected to stumble upon such a treasure at night. Lehigh, startled, realizes it's the same night as before. OM addresses Belmont as the legendary Demon King, a genius who had mastered all 4 elemental magics: wind, fire, water, and earth. However, she expresses her disdain for seeing such a worthless demon resurrected. Lehigh, panicked, yells for her king to run, but OM effortlessly strikes Lehigh aside. Belmont, concerned, asks if Lehigh is okay. Trembling, she insists she's fine but begs him to flee. OM mockingly tells Belmont not to waste time worrying about others and claims that he's powerless now. Belmont tries to summon his magic but fails, staring at his hands as he recalls that his powers have been sealed. OM then attacks, unleashing a powerful wind blast that sends Belmont flying. Lehigh, worried, rushes to his side and asks if he's okay. Belmont stands up, commenting that the human body is truly fragile. The knight approaches, taunting them and confirming that Belmont indeed can no longer use magic due to the seal placed by the great heroine. She mocks that her promotion is now within reach. Lehigh, frustrated, yells that this is all her fault for not hiding the magic. Belmont interrupts, questioning the knight's earlier insult, asking if demons are still treated as scum after all this time. Lehigh confirms this, explaining that despite an official decree declaring that demons should be treated equally, many still cannot accept their existence. Belmont sighs, stating that he expected this and glances at a nearby statue, remarking that, in the end, Arya had also failed in her efforts. Determined, Lehigh begins casting magic, explaining that she has learned some human spells over the years, which should be enough to buy time for her lord to escape. OM dismisses her efforts as useless, declaring that she'll bring what's left of them to the government office. Belmont observes Lehigh's efforts, realizing that the amount of magic she's using is insufficient and that she'll likely be eliminated. Frustrated, Belmont refuses to accept the idea of being trapped again so soon after awakening. He begins to focus, attempting to summon his powers, unwilling to accept that he can no longer wield any of the 4 elemental magics. As Belmont concentrates, he feels a strange sensation in his chest and quickly remembers something: this magic and this feeling. Suddenly, he calls out to Lehigh. As she turns to look, Belmont grabs her arm and kisses her. Lehigh, completely taken aback and embarrassed, doesn't resist but continues the kiss, uncertain of what to do. The moment they part, an enormous surge of magic flows through Belmont's body. He feels his powers return and declares that it's working. A dense aura begins to envelop him, and he exclaims that this is the kind of magic that has been with him for 50 years, the cultivation of yin and yang. OM arrogantly scoffs, calling them foolish for still attempting to resist, and launches another attack. However, Belmont easily deflects it with one hand, as though it were nothing. Angered by OM's arrogance, Belmont declares that it's time for her to burn. He attacks her with incredible power, leaving her utterly exhausted. Bewildered, OM demands to know what kind of magic he is using. Belmont looks at his hand and explains that it is the magic left to him by the heroine when she sealed him. Belmont coldly tells OM that she's fortunate he didn't resolve this earlier, otherwise, she wouldn't have survived. OM, now terrified, screams, questioning how a demon like him could possibly wield the great heroine's secret technique. Belmont, growing more irritated, states firmly that demons are not scum. OM's screams echo in the air as Belmont unleashes his full power, putting an end to the confrontation in mere seconds. The knight lay unconscious on the ground as Belmont called for his servant. Lehigh responded, saying she was ready for any decision he made. Belmont then announced his desire to remove the seal from the demon race, leaving Lehigh astonished but thrilled. She asked if he was serious, and Belmont confirmed, requesting that she take him to a place on the continent filled with women. Confused, Lehigh obliged. The Demon King explained that he intended to use the cultivation of yin and yang to restore the demon race's former glory. Later that night, they arrived in Roseth, a bustling city named after the great heroine Arya. Once the capital of the demon race, Roseth had become a human stronghold where money could make any dream or desire come true. Belmont found himself surrounded by women, who referred to him as a guest and showered him with attention. One offered him specially prepared tea, while another, a snake woman, attempted to seduce him with sly remarks. Another woman, sticky in nature, pleaded with him to play with her. Meanwhile, Lehi was mortified and burning with jealousy but reminded herself that this was all for the sake of helping her lord regain his powers. A catwoman asked Belmont to choose among them, but he surprised everyone by declaring that he wouldn't choose. Lehi felt relieved, thinking her lord wasn't someone given to vulgar desires. However, Belmont, in his usual kingly manner, stated that he wanted all of them at once, shocking everyone and nearly giving Lehi a heart attack. The women, both excited and stunned, began to lead him away, leaving Lehi to mutter bitterly that men were truly terrible creatures. Belmont, however, was thinking strategically, believing that involving multiple races would strengthen the spell. One of the women removed Belmont's hood, insisting he didn't need to cover himself. However, upon seeing his face, the women's attitudes shifted drastically. Furious, they threw both Belmont and Lehi out, calling them scum of the demon race. As they walked away, the women warned them never to return. Lehi, frustrated, asked her master why he didn't simply say he didn't want his hood removed. Belmont replied that as the demon king, he was accustomed to others dressing him. Just then, a demon girl passing by began laughing, mocking them for being socially reclusive. She commented on how, in Roseth, common demons could only make a dishonest living and blamed the demon king for their plight. Angered, Lehi snapped back, yelling that the girl had no right to judge since she didn't understand what had happened. The demon girl scoffed, sarcastically remarking that Lehi was still defending the demon king even after 50 years. Belmont rose silently and approached the girl, his intense gaze causing her to freeze in fear. He asked what she meant about the commoners of the demon clan and inquired about how demons could live normally. Trembling, the girl explained that only those who became students of the Sacred Academy of Heroes in Elmen could live without discrimination. She added that the entrance exam was in 2 days. Belmont turned to Lehi and instructed her to prepare. The girl, stunned, asked if Belmont was seriously planning to take the exam, doubting his chances as a powerless demon. Belmont dismissed her concerns, declaring that the fault lay with the demon king, and he would personally fix it. 2 days later, Belmont and Lehi attempted to take the exam, but a man overseeing the registration told them they weren't qualified and ordered them to leave. Shocked, they sat quietly in a corner as a crowd gathered. Lehi explained that demons needed the endorsement of a noble to take the exam and suggested they find another way. Belmont, however, grumbled bitterly, calling himself disposable trash and a burden to the demon race. Lehi grew frightened, realizing that her master might have entered state D, an extreme state of denial and self-loathing for the demon king. She recalled that this state could occur after he failed to keep a promise or faced humiliation, such as taking 11 seconds instead of 10 to defeat a hero. In this state, Belmont could only respond to others reflexively, so she resolved not to disturb him. Suddenly, an attack came out of nowhere, striking Belmont and sending him flying. Alarmed, Lehi ran to his side to check if he was okay. Nearby, a man named Roy Suma was reprimanding a young woman named Alice Roseth, telling her to stop being reckless. Alice retorted that she wouldn't make the same mistake again and told Roy to let her go. Roy, ignoring her protests, insisted that taking the exam alongside commoners was beneath her and revealed that Lord Ralph had arranged a more appropriate path for her. Alice, irritated, warned Roy not to mention that name in front of her again. Enraged, she unleashed the Phoenix's Rain of Flames spell, but Roy effortlessly blocked the attack, boasting about his superior skills. He praised Alice's elemental mastery for her age but told her she was too inexperienced to challenge someone like him, the elegant commander of the demon army. Alice launched more attacks, but Roy deflected each one with ease, explaining how he could predict the trajectory of her magic. In the midst of their clash, another stray attack struck Belmont, throwing him backward again. Lehi rushed to him, worried, but this time, Belmont's frustration reached a boiling point. Rising with a vacant, intense stare, he advanced toward the fight. Alice and Roy were too absorbed in their quarrel to notice until Belmont suddenly appeared in front of Roy. With an enormous explosion, Roy was completely defeated, collapsing to the ground, unable to move. Shocked, Roy asked where this demon had come from. Lehi tried to calm Belmont, but Alice was visibly impressed by his power. Belmont, however, scolded them both, warning that they should not involve others in their petty conflicts. He begins walking toward Roy, telling him to stand up and apologize. Belmont grabs Royd, preparing to strike again, but just then, the Demon King, disturbed in his state D, enters a state of fury. Alice screams, asking the protagonist to stop, and questions his actions. The king, enraged, turns to face her, declaring there's another person to defeat. However, the moment he looks at Alice, he is taken aback because she resembles Arya. Alice calls the protagonist despicable and questions how he dares to look at her like that. Alice keeps screaming, urging Belmont to leave Royd alone. She throws herself at Belmont's shoulders, causing him to have a vision of Arya. Alice begins to feel something stirring inside her body, though she doesn't understand the sensation. Belmont, confused, wonders why the magical element of yin and yang suddenly activated. He focuses energy into his hand and delivers a powerful blow to Alice, making her lose control of her body. Embarrassed, she protests, saying they shouldn't do this, but the protagonist reassures her, saying this is the way for her powers to return to normal. While the two are locked in a fierce exchange of energy, a hand suddenly intervenes. Lehigh pushes them apart and asks Belmont if he is okay. Belmont confirms he is fine and explains that the activation was triggered by the magical element. Lehigh whispers to the protagonist that Alice is a descendant of the great heroine who once sealed the Demon King. Panting, Alice demands to know who they are. The protagonist approaches her, gets very close, and remarks that while she resembles Arya, they are not the same. He steps back, realizing he must have been mistaken. However, Alice becomes flustered and slaps the protagonist. Lehigh tries to calm everyone down, apologizing and explaining that demons often struggle to distinguish faces and rely on recognizing bodies instead. Alice dismisses the matter and asks if they are unable to participate in the exam due to lacking noble support. Lehigh confirms this and begins to pull the protagonist away, saying they should leave if Alice has nothing more to say. Lehigh also warns Belmont that staying any longer is not wise. Alice shouts for them to stop, insisting she hasn't finished talking. She demands to know what kind of magical element Belmont used on her, noting that demons' innate magic has been banned. She reflects that had the protagonist attacked Royd by surprise, he wouldn't have so easily identified his weakness. Belmont explains that what he used isn't a magical element but something only thou possesses. Lehigh tries to stop him from revealing too much, but the protagonist begins explaining in his serious tone. He slowly reveals that this is because thou is a descendant of an incubus. Lehigh, terrified, nearly faints from the revelation but quickly recovers and looks at the protagonist, acknowledging his caution as proof of his leadership. Alice, still confused, asks if actions like these are what make Belmont muscular. He explains that when an incubus touches certain areas, demonesses feel shivers, and their demonic powers are amplified. Embarrassed, Alice yells at him to stop and, blushing, admits that they helped her. She explains that her family taught her to recognize and value others' kindness. She declares her decision to help them. Later, at the Sacred Academy of Heroes in Elman, the examiner asks a young man if everyone has arrived. The boy confirms and announces they can begin the exam. Suddenly, Lehigh and the protagonist arrive at the entrance, with Lehigh shouting for them to wait. The examiner turns to them and reminds them they can only participate in the exam with noble support. Belmont pulls out a document and asks if this meets the requirement. The examiner, upon seeing the document, is shocked it bears the signature of the Rith family. He asks how they managed to obtain it. At that moment, Alice suddenly appears and announces she wants to register as well, further shocking the examiner, who recognizes her as the descendant of the great heroine. Alice asks if there's an issue with the signature, to which the examiner replies no and allows them to proceed. As they pass through the gate, they find a large group of participants inside. The crowd begins whispering about Alice's presence, with some expressing disdain for her bringing demons from the demon clan. Overhearing this, Lehigh reflects that, even if they get into the academy, life won't be easy for them. Suddenly, a catwoman approaches and greets Alice, expressing surprise that she is participating in the exam. The catwoman introduces herself as Nuke, from the Beast clan. Alice, seeing her, comments that Nuke always causes trouble. Nuke approaches Alice, teasing her for being so cold, and reminds her that they are childhood friends. Embarrassed, Alice brushes it off, saying it's just bad luck that they ran into each other again. Nuke notices the demons accompanying Alice and asks if they are her servants. Alice, flustered, clarifies that they are merely acquaintances. She also warns Nuke to stay away from the protagonist, mentioning that he carries the veins of an incubus. As soon as Alice says this, Nuke walks up to Belmont, hugs him tightly, and exclaims that it's her first time meeting an incubus. Lehigh realizes that the magical element wasn't activated unintentionally. Nuke continues hugging Belmont and declares that she wants him to be her pet. Annoyed, Alice pulls Belmont away and angrily tells Nuke to stop, suggesting she go back home if she wants to behave like that. Nuke laughs, saying she was just joking, and asks why Alice is so serious. Suddenly, another woman appears and sniffs Belmont, commenting on his pleasant scent. Nuke becomes irritated, accusing the newcomer of acting too quickly. Alice is equally displeased by the newcomer's presence. The new girl, already clinging to Belmont, strokes his face and introduces herself as Rana from the elf clan. She asks Belmont if he's truly an incubus, commenting that his scent is unique and that charming demons are special. The situation grows increasingly chaotic as Alice complains about the frustrating circumstances while Nuke walks by her calmly. Alice, furious, screams that enough is enough, but Rosanna, unfazed, remarks that she didn't know Alice kept such training material. Rosanna adds that Alice's older brother joined the academy the previous year and questions whether the Royd family isn't satisfied with already having a guaranteed position. Nuke seizes the moment to remind Alice about last year's deal with the great hero, but Alice yells that she has her own plans, which have nothing to do with her family. The three girls glare at each other intensely, the tension between them escalating. The protagonist, observing the scene, asks Lehigh if she knows the three girls. Lehigh explains that they are the descendants of the three great heroes who fought the Demon King. Belmont, confused, asks if Arya has more than one descendant. Lehigh clarifies that the team that fought the Demon King that year consisted of 4 people, but Arya made the greatest contribution to the battle. Because of this, the families of the other heroes harbor resentment toward the Roseth family. Suddenly, an energy manifests in the center of the venue, drawing everyone's attention. A man appears in the middle of a glowing magic circle, welcoming everyone to the admissions exam for the Great Sacred Academy of Heroes of Elmen. He introduces himself as Edward, the examiner. The students murmur in awe, noting that Edward is the leading candidate to become the Academy's future director. Lehigh becomes nervous, comparing their current strength to Edward's. Belmont reassures her, stating that despite not being at full strength, he has undergone the cultivation of yin and yang twice, which has allowed him to recover part of his elemental power. Determined to test his limits, Belmont concentrates his power into his hand, emitting a radiant light. Lehigh is impressed, wondering if his powers are finally returning. However, when Belmont attempts to use his power, it has no effect. Disappointed, he admits that this seems to be the extent of his abilities for now. He tries again, but the result remains the same. Lehigh begins to question whether it's worth revealing his abilities in this state and fears that he may fail the exam. Thinking quickly, she decides to take action. Lehigh calls Belmont over, firmly grabs his hand, and pulls him closer. Belmont, intrigued, asks what she's doing. Lehigh tells him to remain quiet and shows him a vial containing a bit of dragon saliva. He asks if it's the same substance she used earlier, and she confirms, explaining that it has the same effect but doesn't last long, so he would need to take it right before the exam without anyone noticing. However, Belmont turns away, leaving her confused. He apologizes and says he can't use it. Surprised, Lehigh asks why. Belmont stops, looks at her, and says it wouldn't be right to cheat on the exam. Lehigh, incredulous and irritated, asks why he cares about that when the responsibility of resurrecting the demon clan rests on his shoulders. Belmont stares at her, calling her by name, making her anxiously await what he will say. He declares that even without his former powers, he doesn't consider the demon clan inferior to others. Approaching her, he asks her to trust him, assuring her that he will pass the exam on his own. Calming down, Lehigh agrees and admits that she may have overreacted. She puts the dragon saliva away, reflecting that she had momentarily forgotten that the protagonist is the Demon King. Suddenly, a hand reaches out from a magic circle. Startled, Lehigh asks why Belmont is taking the dragon saliva after saying he didn't need it, but Belmont reveals he hasn't done anything. The hand belongs to Edward, the examiner, who grabs the vial and inspects its contents. Edward accuses someone of attempting to cheat in an exam where magic is allowed and, without hesitation, orders Lehigh's name to be removed from the candidate list. The magic circle in front of her expands, and Lehigh, desperate, screams for Belmont, saying something is wrong. She begins to get pulled into the circle and begs Belmont to save her. He watches in concern, but Edward reassures him, stating that he merely expelled a cheating demon. Edward mocks the situation, saying it's shameful for a demon to cheat, especially since it's been a long time since a demon participated in the exam. He adds that this is why the demon clan is known as the Clan of Disappointment. The students laugh and mock Lehai's expulsion, but the three descendants of the great heroes glare at the crowd, calling them cowards for attacking someone who has already fallen. Belmont, overhearing their comments, begins to grow angry. Edward notices his expression and sarcastically asks if Belmont has something to say, questioning if he would like to join the cheater. Belmont, staring directly at Edward, declares that he will make him apologize to Lehai. Edward laughs, calling the statement a joke, and asks what the problem is with expelling a cheater. Belmont firmly replies that the issue isn't about her being labeled a cheater. Edward looks at Belmont with an ironic smile, dismissing him as another demon who doesn't know his place. He mocks Belmont further, stating that if it weren't for Alice, no one would have even noticed him. Edward, seemingly tired of the argument, announces that they've wasted enough time and declares the start of the Academy's selection exam. Using his magic, Edward creates a giant magic circle that teleports everyone to the top of a cliff. The students, surprised, question how they ended up there. Once they're gathered, Edward explains the conditions of the exam. They must cross a bridge to reach the academy. He uses his magic again to create a bridge that connects the cliff to one of the school's towers. The goal is simple: reach the academy. However, the students quickly grow suspicious of the apparent simplicity of the task, suspecting a hidden trap. Edward confirms their suspicions, explaining that there is a time limit of 30 minutes and only the first 100 participants to cross the bridge will pass the exam. He gives the signal to begin. The students rush toward the bridge but quickly realize something is wrong. Belmont notices that the surface of the bridge feels excessively smooth, and when he looks down, he sees that his feet are beginning to sink. Panic spreads among the participants, who struggle to understand what's happening. A girl urges the others to keep moving despite the difficulties. Edward, watching, begins to laugh and reveals that the bridge is made of slime. He explains that the less elemental force a participant has, the more they will sink, and those unable to control their powers will be immobilized.